Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with St. Paul, Minnesota-based jazz guitarist, composer, and educator Jackson Potter. We talked to him in early November about his debut, brand new 2021 CD, Restless, out on Wisecat Records. This is a passionate musician who has achieved a significant amount of success in the short time that he has been on the music scene. He began playing professionally around the Twin Cities at the age of 16, and he has continued to flourish ever since. Enjoy the story.
Thank you for taking a minute after Neon Jazz. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
You bet. So as we established, I'm going to act as though I had some preternatural notion of things. This album was penned before the pandemic, but coming out now with the chance for live music and just being a strange time, how does it feel to have this album come out at this particular time in 2021?
Well, I think I'm grateful to be able to play a pre-release show. I was able to play a pre-release show with the band in Miami and experience the music one last time with them and in front of friends and fellow musicians and you know, people who were able to see it live, and that was really special.
From your standpoint as an artist, you know, so much goes into a release, so much emotion and communication. What do you ultimately want the listener to get from this experience? How do you want them to feel about this project?
I want it to, I mean, obviously you have an idea when you make a project of what you want it to sound like. So for the longest time, when you're in the recording process, when you're in the writing process, you're trying to get everything to fit that vision. But once it's out, I guess I'm hoping that all have made something that someone somewhere is going to connect with and that they're going to want to listen to again.
This time of quarantine lockdown has been huge for all of us to kind of have a mirror in front of us and to figure some things out. What did you figure out about yourself over this time that maybe you didn't realize before? How will that make you stronger as you reemerge to live music and promoting this album?
I think the value of my community, musical community, my community of friends, I think I really took that for granted because during the pandemic I was really isolated from everybody. And musically that was frustrating. Personally that was frustrating. And as things continue to open up, I'm just so grateful for the people I'm around and the community I'm involved in.
So you're a native of St. Paul, Minnesota. Talk to me a little bit about what it was like growing up there and how, you know, music and more specifically jazz became your profession.
So the Twin Cities have a surprisingly good jazz scene. I know a lot of people I've talked to sort of assume that there wouldn't be a lot of music going on there, but there's really its own bubble and it has its own personality, and there's a lot of good music there. So I was fortunate to be able to see some good music growing up, and I was also fortunate enough to have a lot of really good musical mentors in that city. To name a few, Pat Moriarty, who passed away recently, sadly, my guitar teacher Zach Harris, and Eric Mokel, a band director, Joe Churchich. There's a jazz band program at my middle school, and then a really good one at my high school that connected students with musicians sort of throughout the Twin Cities and even throughout the Midwest in festivals and different things like that. So there were some really good resources for diving into that music when I was younger.
Who were some influences? Who did you listen to that really kind of influenced the way that you approached the instrument?
So I started out being really into blues music, and my first influences were people like Jimi Hendrix and Stevie Ray Vaughan. And then eventually I started listening to players like Robin Ford, who get into more of a fusion between jazz and blues. And then I got into people like John Scofield and Pat Metheny, Pat Martino, and the list just goes on and on.
What was the first live show that you ever saw that really made you think, man, I would love to do that?
That's a good question. Wow, I really have to go back on my memory to answer this question. But I think probably one of the first really good live shows I saw was of Pat Moriarty and his quartet at the Black Dog Cafe in St. Paul. Experiencing the music live and really being a part of it, that was a really big moment for me. It's so different than just listening to a recording, actually being there in the audience and experiencing it firsthand. I think that really inspired me.
speaking of inspiration, what have you learned from Mike Moreno? What has he given you that's been instrumental in you growing as a musician?
Well, he has this incredible wealth of knowledge about music from his career as a musician. I think I've learned the most from playing with him, playing duo with him in his apartment in Brooklyn, and then him sort of picking apart certain things that I need to work on and certain different conceptual approaches I can have towards music that will help me as a player and an artist.
This is your debut, and there's always high hopes, high expectations. What are your expectations with this release? Is it just relieving to have it out, or do you have any expectations moving forward and then going into your next album?
That's a good question. My biggest concern when I made this album was just learning from it. So I wouldn't say I have really set in stone expectations. I'm happy that it's turned out the way it has so far and that there's people listening to it. And I hope as my career develops, people will continue to listen to this album, and it will be sort of the first step in my career.
Every day you wake up, you get the chance to be a musician. It's your job. What is the most enjoyable part of being a professional musician for you?
Wow. The opportunity to spend the majority of my time with music every day. And even when I'm teaching, the opportunity to share that joy of music with other people, I think is incredible. We're so lucky to get to do that as musicians.
As we return to the stage, what do you hope we all realize about the power of live music that we've been away from for so long? What do you hope collectively the musician and the audience gets from this?
How essential it is, I think. I think it's so essential to have quality art in our community. I think it brings us together. In this day and age, it's really taken for granted because there's so much media at our hands at all times. We forget the power of, being in the room with a group of performers who are making the magic happen live. So I hope it's sort of a wake-up call to the general public about the importance of live performance.
So everyone has a perception or an idea of who they think you are, your family, your friends, your fans, but ultimately you live your life. What's your perception of who you think you are?
I suppose just somebody who's searching to really be myself genuinely through music. Yeah, I don't have too much to say on that. Not anything significantly different from anyone else. Music is my vehicle for self-betterment, I suppose.
Cool, man. Hey, man, thank you for taking a minute out to Neon Jazz today to talk about the debut release. Good luck with it and getting back on stage and moving forward. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in Minnesota, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Jackson for his time, music, and story. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit Neon Jazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.